End up getting this compare and contrast stuff. What I started doing a few years ago is I started, not all the time, instead of using your pre and post shading techniques or your color modulation stuff with the airbrush, I started using oils to kind of get the same effects. And I like the oils because they're very forgiving. If you make a mistake, you can correct them. You can even get the thinner and basically remove most of what you put on the model. Where with the airbrush, of course, if you make a mistake, it can be harder to fix. Especially if you're using acrylic paints. You're kind of, I have a bad habit of hitting the trigger just a bit too hard when I'm trying to use thinner paint, and just get a real nice blob of paint where I just wanted a nice feathering effect. So I want to move away from that. Go ahead, go to the next slide, Pete.
Yes, sir.
Wanted to come up with a different way to get the really nice finishes that you can see on models without having to use the airbrush. And of course the goal for everybody is, like it says up here, you know, we all want to have an accurate paint color for our model, but if you just sprayed, let's say, and you'll see an example with this M24 I have up here, if you just spray straight olive drab on there, 1/35th scale or 1/48th or whatever scale you're working at, it doesn't look good. And while it's probably pretty close to the real thing, you've got to take into the scale effect, which I think Zeliga used that term quite a bit in some of his books. And it's true, so you want to try to really get the base colors to stand out a little bit more, give them a little bit more character. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Pete. So what people have been doing, and they all work really well, you've got your pre or post shading, panel fading, color modulation, and this isn't common, but you've seen the guy that's basically doing color modulations, but using the black, white, and coloring on top of that. And they all really, you can get some really stunning finishes, and adjusting that base color before you start doing all your weathering, all of your, you know, chipping, washes, everything else, you got to have that good solid foundation moving forward. And you do end up covering a lot of that up with the weathering, but it's still there even though you don't distinctly see it. Like with this one, it's dark right now with olive drab. You end up doing the panel fading and changing the color. You are changing that olive drab, so it's not olive drab anymore. But you're still tricking the eye to say, hey, that looks olive drab even though I have all these color effects. Go to the next one, Pete. So, you know, this is the T64, which I have up here. That was, I used the airbrush technique, doing the panel fading and stuff. So here it is, you know, that's the base color right there. Green, okay, fine. If you left it there, of course, you're not going to win any awards. Next one. Then you start, so here I started adding darker colors of the mix that I made, put in all the little shadows all around the model, again, using the airbrush. Next one. Then I added the highlights over it. So now you got a real heavy contrast there. And I wasn't happy with that contrast, so next, go ahead. I took my base colors again, or actually just one of the base colors, and then just did a real quick glaze over them to kind of unify them, tie them all together, and have the different shading and everything else. Built it up. But again, I was using the airbrush, and like I say, I have a lot of trouble with the airbrush sometimes, you know, making the paint too thick, too thin, spraying it too hard, whatever. Plus, you got to worry about, you know, you're spraying those fumes in the air, so you do have health concerns. You do have, for me, I work midnight shifts, so a lot of my modeling is done on Saturday night at 2 in the morning. I'm running the air compressor. I'm going to wake up my family and everything like that. So, go ahead and go to the next one. So, I went and started doing this oil technique. But again, I'm just talking here about the airbrush. You got your advantages. You got your base colors that you use, so you can just lighten them, darken them however you want. Easy mix, go, and you're done. Paint dry time is pretty quick, so you can keep moving on real fast. Disadvantage, of course, like we talked about here, is you got to be really confident with the airbrush. Some people are really good, like me, so-so. You can do the different errors. Go ahead. Now, the oil paints, the reason I like them, you've got a lot longer drying time on them, right? So that means you can apply them however you're going to apply them, and I'll show how you do it in a minute, how I do it in a minute here. You can then apply your highlights, your shadows, and then you can blend them in together, just like the figure painters do. They're easy to work with. You have a good variety of colors, and if you don't have the exact color that you want, you can mix them together, make a shade you want. And it's nice to maybe not be the exact color of the tank that you're working on, because it gives you a nice little contrast. And again, it gives you some visual appeal. Of course, the disadvantage is it has a longer drying time. You got to wait a while for this stuff to dry. But you're applying it fairly thin on the model. If you put the paint on the cardboard, that little trick to wick away some of the linseed oil before you apply it, that's going to help with the drying time. And again, for me, probably like most of us, you know, I apply it on Sunday, the last thing I do before I'm done for the weekend. I leave it sit there. I'm probably not going to get back to that amount until the next weekend. And by then, 2-3 days, it's dry. It's ready to go anyways. You can put a coat of varnish on it and you can continue on with your different effects. The oils can be expensive, but you get a nice tube of oil. It's going to last you a long time. So here's an example where I started where I was using the oils. Again, the Olive Drab M24. Not so exciting. So next slide. Here I've used different oils to add some highlights to it. And you notice some like that hatch up there. I actually do a lot of things too where I map different areas of the tank with the paintbrush to start adding even more contrast. But so I add some highlights with different colors. Go ahead, the next one. Then I use the shadow brown a lot to do shadows. And I'll make, like here, I put some shadow brown to break up this line because it does dip in a little bit here. You're never going to get that with a wash or not easily. Put it there to start breaking up. I did add some more highlights since the last picture. But you're just adding shadows and just blending them together, mix them in together. So it really starts to come to life there. It works really good with, really well with the single color. So then at one point I was like, well, we'll work with the camouflage because I know when I've tried to do like pre-post shading on camo, it really doesn't come out for me. It might work for you, it doesn't come out well for me. So can I do it on a camouflage pattern? So again, we've got the little Chinese IV there. There's the base colors. Go ahead. And again, so now I started adding, you know, for the greens, use the light green oil. For the dark yellow, I use the buff oil. And then for this is actually dark green, not black. But I use the faded gray oil to add the highlights in there. Sure. And it starts popping it up. Yeah.
You had a wash on there too?
At this point, yeah. Some of the models, when I started doing this, I was actually doing the wash and then I was adding the oils. I've changed that now. I usually do all the oil work, then I add the washes after the fact. Let's go ahead and add the shadow, the next one. You can see the shadows. Obviously, I had wash in here. Well, that kind of defeats what I do because then I come back and I shadow in where there's the different panels, you know, the lower part, and sometimes I'll do like in this panel, you have the oils going around here, blocking this in, so you have your highlights here, your shadows on the edges, just to really start bringing it in. Well, I had the washes in there, so I'm applying these oils into the corner over the wash, so it kind of didn't really work that way, so I ended up having to reapply the wash over the oils right after I did this to capture back that really deep contrast with a dark pin wash. And so see, and when you look at it, you know, you've really brought out the green, the yellow, you've added some fading, you're adding shadows, you're really bringing in a lot of effect to the model here, and that's what I love seeing that. Then later on, you'll do everything else. Go to the next one. So how do I apply it? Well, when I started thinking about what I was going to start doing, I started thinking, you know, you have all the debates about dry brushing, is it dead technique? And again, you know, I mentioned I was thinking about the figure paintings, how can I add interest? So I started thinking, well, what if I kind of use similar to a dry brush, take the brush and just brush it on nice with a, scrub it on kind of like a dry brushing effect, but I'm not trying to get the corners and get like you did traditionally. I'm just using it to block it in, and with the oils, you can put them on thicker or thinner, however you want to do it. And you just get it in there and you take a clean brush or Q-tips a lot and then just blend it in. So go ahead. This video takes about 10 minutes. It's going to be crude. I've never filmed myself before.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So there's some things that, so I kind of stumble around a bit, so I apologize for the crudeness, but this is just going to show exactly what I do. I do have the hole here with me. This side, when we're done with the videos, it's how I ended up right here. You can pass around, it's a little hard to see in the dark, but this hasn't been touched up since I did this a week ago. Is the volume? I am talking, so.
A couple flat brushes just for applying oil. Yeah. The oils are easy to blend, wonderful to work with, give a nice little pop to the base colors, which base color looks fine, but it's kind of boring at this point. Again, given that we'll be giving washes to it later on. I've applied my oils to a piece of cardboard just to kind of wick away the excess linseed oil for a while. So it's a little bit drier when I apply it, which will help with drying later on after it's been applied to the model. So I got to remove these out of the way, but you can see you can just use a lot of different oils are available, of course. Effluents are really nice. And if you don't have the right color that you need, well, you can probably mix it pretty easily with the Viewing oil. So first I'll start with lightening the yellow. For that I'm going to use the buff to lighten up the yellow a little bit, add some depth to it there. I'll go from the buff to the green because, well, the buff will actually help with the lightening of the green. Even if the little buff is mixed with the light green, it'll all work out well together. So for this I'm just going to use a number 4 flat brush and have a rag ready just to wipe away the excess. So I'll just get some on the brush, wipe away the excess here, and then just almost similar to an old method of dry brushing, just kind of start blending it in. The area I want to apply for the highlights.
And I did apply more than I wanted to, but you'll see you can take it. It's not a problem because you can just remove the excess and work your way down however you want it to be.
There, I've applied a little bit heavy right now, but that's fine.
Is that a wet brush, Sean?
A little bit more over here.
No, it's I don't
section.
thin it with paint thinner. It's a dry
I've
brush.
got my excess there. You can see it's
Just
pretty
add
heavy.
oils.
Right out of the tube.
What's that?
Take one of my
Right out to
brushes.
just dried it out a little bit on the cardboard.
And just slowly blend it in some more with the paint in the background. Slowly working it away so it's more and more translucent to what we want. You can still see the base color in there. Slowly just working away. If I was unhappy with how heavy this was, I could use mineral spirits or whatever you want to use, thin oils to clean off the excess. And I will strip it all the way off, or even strip it all the way off with the base color. Okay, keep in mind that the base is a satin finish, or very slightly satin finish, which allows it to adhere but not be too smooth so that it just wipes right off either. We don't want it to be able to wipe clean off. Well, in there. If I thought that was a little bit too heavy, I could grab a Q-tip. Q-tips are really great for really cleaning off a bunch if it's not there the way we don't like it. See, it's picking it up and slowly just blending it in with our base color already. Pretty quick. So now I want to use my green. I can go ahead and use the same brush again. Keep in mind, the buff could be used to lighten the green up a little bit, but here I'm actually going to use a light green. Again, just wipe it off. Almost a dry brush. Depends on how heavy of a concentration you want on the paint. Sorry about the camera bump there. And just start working our way in with it. I've applied it. So now take the clean brush. Again, just start blending it in more and more, working its way in, using the properties of oil to blend it in with the green more and more. It doesn't have to be perfect coverage either. Some of the original green shows through, that's great. Gives us the effect that we want. Again, add a little volume and depth to the paint. Maybe a little bit of fading. Whatever hope you're hoping to get with it. Just give it more life.
It's a good way to look at it.
It was there before. Again, just using the Q-tip to really take away a lot of the excess so that it's there, but it's not so deep. And like that, pretty well I've added it in. You can keep reworking it until you keep getting the amount of oil you want. You could add a different color of oil if you really want to highlight the center, like maybe the green. I've taken a light gray before and really worked it in, or you could lighten up to almost a white on the center of the dark yellow. I haven't done lower because we're going to save that for something else in a few minutes here. So now we're going to want to clean our brush off. So I'm going to take the one that's been dry for a while. We're going to add the shadows. In this case, using the dark brown or shadow brown, I forget how long It's really nice color for this. And just gonna kind of, again, take a little bit of brown, wipe off a bunch, the excess on a rag, and just start really working. I'm gonna be a little bit heavier on the lower portions. Because I'm gonna want the, of course, as you go dark, further down on the body, the darker it should be. You want a little bit more shadow down there, kind of using the modulation technique. Add it in there. Okay. So now here, I'm going to be very, just kind of blend everything downward. So a lot of downward strokes, taking away the excess. Nice thing with the brown, it can be used for a lot of the colors. Again, just slowly work it in. Wipe off the excess there. And it's pretty heavy at that point, so again, use our Q-tip. Just kind of wipe away the excess.
The guy that does PBS shows, the happy little trees. Trees.
Just keep working it until I'm happy with the amount of paint that's there.
Bob Ross.
Yeah, we just need to get you a big afro, Sean.
It's a happy little home. It's a happy dirty little home.
Yeah.
You know we had a big fat
Brush.
baby before every show.
Really start blending it with the base color, or the lightning color there. So we get more and more of a transition over time. So keep working it. So again, we get a nice little shading there. Maybe a bit too heavy for this. See how it's coming up a little bit high. If we wanted to reduce that again, we can just go back to one of our other colors. What's there? Highlight color. And reapply that a bit. Work it in a bit more. Oops. Bring it up. Clean off that brush a bit. Too much brown there, which is fine. Just re-add our buff and just slowly blend it all in. We're really happy with the result. Blend it in. Again, just keep blending the colors, adding some more if we want to until we're happy with the amount of shadows, highlights, background that we have in there. See if we can get a good shot of it there, the lighting. And we're done, just like that. You could let it dry for a while. It'll take a day or two for it to fully dry. But again, you have working time here. It's still wet enough that if you want to manipulate it some more, you can quite easily. Now the next stage that I might take is I want to really get heavy shadow around some of the suspension arms. So take some oil paint here and just add real heavy around the outline of the tops of the arms. And this I'll let sit for several minutes, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Thanks.
What?
next video.
Go to the next
video.
video.
Well, I could have let it just run for 20 minutes while I was letting it do that.
Part 2.
But I do.
Alright, so here again, I've let the thicker shadow oil paint, but the suspension arms just dry for a bit. You can see I haven't really added any other oils down here. You don't necessarily need this, but sometimes you just want to add some deeper shadow to a certain area on the tank. So again, this brown color works, or maybe a dark gray or whatever, depending on the base color that you're using. But this technique has been demonstrated by a lot of other people too. So you have this excess oil here. All you're going to want to do is slowly wipe the brush toward the desired area to kind of embed the deeper, darker color there to really start building a shadow later on after we will have add our glosses and decals and everything and we do our washes. So we'll get the really deep, like maybe panel line shading in there. So we can add a little bit more shadow, just a little bit past what a wash would do. Simply, this takes a lot of work because there's a lot of oil here, as you can see. So it can take a while to start brushing it in there. And again, our Q-tip may help out a lot in this, but okay, so we're taking away the excess. Use the brush to really kind of finalize it. Get more Q-tips.
I go through a lot of Q-tips.
Where's your
You
assistant?
really use a lot of Q-tips.
Where's your assistant?
Me, myself, and I.
There. We've got a good amount of shadow. Start working away on these other ones. The excess. Point that you can see a nice amount of shadow, nice thick shadow right in there. I probably put a little bit too much on, too deep. And these other ones you can see it's a lot more, so I probably could have used a little bit finer brush to add it, just concentrate a little bit more where I was going to put it and touch it up at that point. But just like that, you've got a nice amount of shadow built in. Before you do a wash, you add a wash to the top of this. And usually I just do pin washes to really darken right at that intersection of the arm to the body. And done. You've got a real nice shadow build. Real base, good base for the final weathering. And that's pretty much that quick and that easy. Thanks.
Sean, the wash is an oil-based wash to help blend out more, or
I made my own washes with oils and whatnot. I've been using the ready-made products just because, well, I open the bottle, apply and go instead of having to make my own. But yeah, oil-based washes will work, yeah, just fine. So I use the oils, heavy oils for the washes as well. But like I say, over the past couple of years with all the pre-made washes, somebody did that work for me, I use them. Now, in the demo with this one, sometimes you maybe only want to add a highlight or a shadow. So here, like with this one, I had the brown, so the green's been highlighted, but I just added the shadow right here at this intersection for the brown. I didn't highlight the brown at all. And so sometimes there's been a lot of projects that I will just add the shadows and that's it, and blend those into the rest of the body and leave other colors without highlighting them. So again, it's just whatever you want to try to achieve with your finish. Working with all. Let's go ahead, Pete. And of course, you can use this with any of your models, like here in the next one. I use that technique with this Viper. Again, you can see, added the oils into the darker areas, applied white for the light areas and blended them all in, and add some washes to it too.
You'll have no tracks on it.
No tracks on there, sorry. And then this is just after doing all of the final steps, final weathering, just showing how he ended up. And again, a lot of it kind of gets hidden by the weathering, but it's still there. Your eye is catching it, though you don't fully realize it's not. Keep going. And there's the chaffee, and I have all these up here. You can come take a closer look. So again, you can see where some of the fading, the shadows are, but it's been blended in with the rest of the weathering. And as you saw, what I was using on the olive drab was actually olive green. You know, it's too green, but now when you're looking at this, you can see that's there, but you're still looking at it, and to me at least, it looks olive drab, even though you've changed the actual color away from olive drab.
When do you do your decals?
What's that?
When do you do decals?
Before I do all the weathering. You know, apply after the oils have dried, and if I don't use oils, any model, I'll apply my gloss coat, put the decals on, seal those in, then I'll do all my washes and everything. So,
Okay.
Sean?
Yeah.
Do you find it's a lot easier to do your oils with that gloss coat on when you're working with them?
I played with that for a while. There's a couple oils I did. I have found that I don't want a full matte one because it really grabs the oil and it's hard to remove then.
Yeah.
But that's why I like the satin. What I do is a lot of times I actually mix in. I was telling people earlier, I use Tamaya pretty much all the time for all my paintings. Sometimes I use it a lot with the
Yeah, me
Leho.
too.
So I'll use the clear and mix some clear in with the paint when I spray it on. So just enough to give it a real slightly satin finish because it allows me to remove it. I've done a full gloss before. You put it on, and when you go to try to work it in, remove it, well, it comes right back off, and
Right.
you're just
So the
spinning
satin
in
has
circles.
just enough grab.
No, enough grab, but but yet you can still remove it. And again, I don't know what you just did there, Pete.
Pretty realistic.
No, that probably was my last slide. And that's what I just wanted to show. And I'll keep using the oils and the weathering, like for streaking effects. A lot of times I just use the oils to make my streaks, and that's it. So that's all there is. Go ahead, take a look at the models on the table, just if you want to.
Be careful.
One more side.